양지 진부스던 힘이 장존의 문음 진부가 겼다 바그라 다른 찬도 실물도 tumbadik janla ki shamsar mechanrawar seringi jankamsa jawar tukji shanla yilarma jime panso jala sara de gongje topan pawar shinji lo gongje topan pawar shinji lo gongje topan pawar shinji.
Profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we can hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate sentient beings, please generate bodhicitta before today's teaching. We are now teaching the Arya Mahayana Sutra, called the All-Expansive Great Liberation, purifying negative deeds through cleansing remorse, perfectly arranged for the accomplishment of Buddhahood. We've completed the upper and middle volumes of this sutra. Next is the lower volume. I took a look at the lower volume. It's not particularly long nor particularly short. I really wish to complete it this year, but I'm not quite sure if we can do it. Our curriculum for the second half of the year haven't been completely finalized yet, and we still have the Shurangama Sutra course, so we have to see when the time comes. I also looked at the Shurangama Sutra today. On October 22nd, 2019, we taught the last class. In my notebook, I wrote, "See you next year." But next year didn't happen. This year became the year after, and that didn't happen either. Maybe this year won't work out either. We'll see how things go. We've only taught a little of the Shurangama Sutra, just a bit at the beginning, not much. But perhaps if we have the opportunity in the future, I aspire to teach the Shurangama Sutra. We also taught a little bit of the Analects at the beginning. So with some of these teachings, we'll see how things unfold. We hope to complete each teaching properly. This time with the Sutra of Great Liberation, everyone has been listening very attentively. Personally, I've been comparing different versions, including the Tibetan version, to share with you all. Not particularly extensive, nor particularly brief, roughly teaching in this manner. The listeners have also been particularly attentive. Also, some people here have been taking notes to share with everyone. I'm very grateful to them. Perhaps some things, because of my language and other aspects, may not be completely clear to everyone, but if written materials are provided, it becomes easier no matter what. Everyone should do their utmost to create favorable conditions to hear such Mahayana Dharma, to study such Mahayana Dharma. This is very critical. For each person, indeed, a human life is extremely rare. Moreover, such a rare human life will at a certain point encounter impermanence. So before the great Lord of Impermanence arrives, if we can study and complete this teaching, it is everyone's hope. For me as well, my greatest hope is that these Mahayana teachings bring some transformation to each person's mind. This is very important. Now, many people like receiving empowerments and some tantric instructions. This is also important. Indeed, receiving empowerments and tantric teachings is very important. I think many Dharma friends will have the opportunity this year, and I'll also do my best to create such conditions for everyone. But from a certain perspective, if one doesn't practice well, just going here today and there tomorrow to receive empowerments may not have particularly great meaning. Some carpenters who work here regularly also mentioned in private conversations that some people particularly love going around to get empowerments. Do they truly actually practice or not? I've heard some people saying this, so our practice is very important. If we don't practice, receiving empowerments has no meaning. What's even more importantly, studying Mahayana sutras and commentaries through listening and learning, this matters more. Many people may superficially think this isn't particularly important. Regarding classes, it's fine to attend or not, but if there's an empowerment, I'll absolutely receive it. But if you don't practice diligently, perhaps after receiving so many empowerments, maybe in your own practice process, your conduct doesn't accord with the Dharma, your practice isn't stable. In the end, you may not succeed. So the great masters of past generations also especially emphasize hearing and contemplation. Some great masters even said that our empowerments merely give everyone an auspicious karmic connection first. Actually, transmitting the Dharma is most important. So personally, in my life, I place this among the most important matters. I hope all of you here, whatever teaching you're studying, see it through from beginning to end. Even if you encounter great difficulties along the way, try your best not to break the transmission lineage. Also, take every class of every teacher teaching seriously. We have a habit. What is it? At the beginning, when receiving a teaching, we're very diligent. Then gradually, we become more relaxed. This is what Patrul Rinpoche called hearing and contemplation, like tadpoles. In the water, there's tadpoles, the early stage of frogs. They have big heads and small tails. So with our study and contemplation, if we have particularly strong enthusiasm at the beginning, including preparing reference books, but then gradually we don't take it seriously anymore. That's not good. Everyone should study earnestly and comprehend thoroughly throughout the entire learning. Next, we'll teach the lower volume, the Arya Mahayana Sutra, called The All-Expansive Great Liberation, Purifying Negative Deeds Through Cleansing Remorse, perfectly arranged for the accomplishment of Buddhahood, lower volume. Then at that time, when the Bodhisattva Faith in Science had, for the welfare of himself and all sentient beings, requested Bhagavan Shakyamuni to teach the names of the Buddhas. In the upper volume, Shakyamuni Buddha taught in response to Bodhisattva Faithful Appearance asking some questions. Bodhisattva Faithful Appearance asked for all beings and for himself about the names of the Buddhas. The Buddha spoke of the names of all Buddhas across the 10 directions, the 12 divisions of the scriptures, and the names of the Mahayana Sangha. All of this was already taught in the upper volume. All of that has already been completed. Next, again desiring to give the great lion's roar. The Buddha is preparing to begin giving forth the lion's roar. What is this so-called lion's roar? Called the definitive words. This lower volume primarily teaches the most definitive, extremely profound meanings of the third turning of the Dharma wheel. Previously, it taught about conventional matters, the names of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, accumulating merit and purifying obscuration, these principles. From this volume onward, the Buddha teaches the most definitive and profound Dharma, which is called the lion's roar. What is the lion's roar? The definitive teaching. The definitive teaching is most ultimate, closest to the true nature. What is the so-called definitive teaching? The demonstration of definitive words is the Tathagata always nurturing and remaining, since he is understood not to pass beyond sorrow. Again, he teaches that all beings, and change this and to again, the again of furthermore, the again of addition. Additionally, it also demonstrates that all sentient beings have the intrinsic nature of a Buddha. Afterwards, it begins to say the Buddha proclaimed to beings the definitive teaching, the most definitive Dharma. The definitive teaching clearly knows that the Tathagata constantly abides without cessation. The first one mainly says, just as taught in the Uttara Tantra, the Buddha never ceases. Before ordinary people, the Buddha has nirvana and cessation. Actually, the Buddha is without birth and cessation. This principle is very difficult for ordinary people to understand. We all think, oh, the Buddha passed into nirvana long ago. Everyone thinks this way. But actually, the Buddha is the true nature. The Tathagata is without birth and cessation. This is explained very clearly in the Lotus Sutra. This is the first point. Second, additionally, it also demonstrates that all sentient beings have the intrinsic nature of a Buddha. All of us, again teaching all beings possess Tathagata Garbha, possess Buddha nature. Superficially, it appears that the Tathagata's constant nature is without cessation. All beings possess Buddha nature. These two are very simple. But actually, this lion's roar definitive teaching of the Tathagata, generally our worldly writers, scientists, theorists, they may not be able to express this. Across the world, we have many famous works and treatises. Everyone can see it, and in these works, they can research and speak of the appearances of all things and the nature of all things. But the principle that each being possesses Tathagata Garbha, whether ancient or modern, east or west, from ancient times to now, how many wise people and scholars have spoken of this, we can also see it. The principle that the Buddha's constant nature is without cessation. How much do these theorists speak of it? Looking at it, these two sentences seem very simple. The definitive teaching of the Tathagata, if we don't have the guidance of a spiritual friend, we just read through it without much thought. This definitive teaching the Tathagata teaches, nothing special. But actually, if you contemplate carefully, indeed each being possessing Tathagata Garbha, this principle is very important. The Tathagata Garbha Sutra and the Uttara Tantra explain it comparatively clearly, yet without without the guidance of a spiritual friend, relying on our own power, it's very difficult to understand. Therefore, the Mahayana compendium also teaches planting wheat yields wheat, not other things. Likewise, all things, Buddha nature is also thus. Buddha's cause, Buddha's fruit, the nature doesn't change. We often say, plant melons, get melons, plant beans, get beans. The meaning is causes of the same type can produce dharmas of the same type. Just as wheat can produce wheat, wheat cannot produce barley or rice. This is impossible. Similarly, Buddha nature also has this rule. We beings are called the cause of Buddhahood, and it can finally produce the Buddha fruit. This nature never changes, so each of us beings actually has hope of attaining Buddhahood in the future, precisely because we have Tathagata Garbha. Our wisdom has limitless treasures. Everyone should be clear about this point. For example, when you're young, when you study languages, however many languages you study, you can learn them all. If you study knowledge, you can study whatever knowledge. Actually, we do possess wisdom that can be developed. It's just a matter of whether we have the right conditions. So this is still very important. This is the first point just discussed. First, the lion's roar definitive teaching of the Tathagata, Buddha nature is without cessation. Second, all beings possess Tathagata Garbha. Thus, it humbles the Devaputra Māras. In Tibetan, some versions change the Māras to celestial Māras. That also works. It humbles the Devaputra Māras, the Tirthikas and so forth, and brings them under the power of refuge. Therefore this is called the lion's roar. When teaching these principles, all the celestial Māras in the world become afraid. All non-Buddhists have to take refuge and have to be subdued. This is the power of the Tathagata's lion's roar. Indeed, before any demonic forces, when we speak of the definitive teachings of Tathagata Garbha, they have no opportunity to exploit. Actually, those non-Buddhist teachers may speak about some simple principles in other areas. But as just discussed, regarding Buddha nature and related aspects, this is precisely the distinctive characteristic of the Buddha path. Precisely because of this, the Sutra of Lalita Vistara also says, like when a lion roars, all small creatures are frightened. When the Buddha's lion roars, it subdues non-Buddhist schools of thought. The meaning is when the lion's roar sounds, outside creatures, including small insects and animals, become very afraid, very fearful. Similarly, when the Buddha proclaims the lion's roar, it subdues other various schools of thought. On this point, we're not praising ourselves and disparaging others, but consider the Tathagata as the lion's roar voice. Among all the world's doctrines, if it were spread, how many could truly attack it, truly overturn it? We can observe this for ourselves. Here we've now taught the Tathagata's lion's roar voice. Everyone should understand this. Actually, the Tathagata's lion's roar voice also appears in the Nirvana Sutra. There's specifically a chapter on the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Simagosa that teaches the most definitive Tathagata Garbha. When it's convenient, we can look at that too. Now, didn't the Buddha, after teaching the names of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, he taught these few brief sentences? Having thus manifestly taught, in Tibetan it's proclaimed, but that's also fine. Different versions exist. Manifestly taught also works. Having thus manifestly taught, after teaching this way, put forth the broad and long tongue. Add those words before, then covering the great tracheochasm. After proclaiming such profound lion's roar, the Buddha then began to put forth the broad and long tongue, covering the entire great tracheochasm. At this time, all worlds manifested 6 kinds of quaking. What are these 6 kinds? The 6 kinds of quaking are east rising, west sinking. Rising means surging upward, which can also mean high, ascending. Sinking means downward. The meaning is east up, west down. Then west rising, east sinking, south rising, north sinking, north rising, south sinking. Also, center, rising, edges, sinking, edges, rising, center, sinking. Or rising is like waves surging up. Then sinking means beginning to disappear, going down. Actually, these 6 kinds of quaking, you see, east, south, west, north, center, and edges, there are these 6 kinds of changes. Let's first look at the Buddha's putting forth the broad and long tongue mark. Perhaps some people think that after the Buddha finished saying this, suddenly this kind of tongue appeared and then covered the entire great trichiliocosm. Many people, especially modern people, feel difficult to accept. But regarding this, I remember in the Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra, there are many discussions. When questioning, it says the Buddha is originally very dignified, very solemn. If he suddenly puts out his tongue, it's somewhat frivolous, not dignified. The answer says this is for those who find it difficult to understand, difficult to believe and comprehend, for them to understand and believe further. For this purpose, the Buddha manifested such a miraculous display. What is this like? For example, according to the Brahmin's explanation in the past, if a Brahmin doesn't speak falsely, his tongue can touch his nose. They have this belief, and it indicates this person doesn't speak falsely. If the Buddha's entire tongue covers his entire face, then Brahmins immediately believe that, oh, he completely doesn't speak falsely. This is one reason. Also asking, the Buddha's tongue can cover the entire face, and also the great trichiliocosm. What's the reason for this? This is manifested before different people. For example, for some people, if the Buddha's tongue covers his own face, they can arouse some small faith. If it covers the entire great trichiliocosm, then great faith will arise in their mind stream. There's this necessity. Also asking if it covers the great trichiliocosm. It's difficult for everyone to see it. Why can everyone see it? For example, if we stick out our tongue, people present might be able to see it. But the Buddha manifested so many, the sentient beings with karmic connections in the great trichiliocosm could see it. What's the reason? Actually, this is through the Buddha's power. Without relying on spiritual power, even 10th Bhumi Bodhisattvas might not be able to see it. If relying on spiritual power, even animals can see such appearances. So spiritual power is also inconceivable. Here we should understand what? Understand that when the Buddha puts forth the broad and long tongue, actually there are many purposes. On one hand, at that time in India, there were many Brahmins. According to their customs, if the tongue is relatively large, they would think this person speaks truthfully, reliably. So through this kind of custom, innumerable beings further developed faith in him. Otherwise, the Buddha is such a dignified person, suddenly manifesting a very large tongue. Perhaps some people, according to modern people's way of thinking, may not be able to accept it. We can't accept it doesn't mean that they couldn't accept it at that time. We can't accept it doesn't mean other beings can't accept it. Moreover, through this method, many beings developed faith. This is the principle of putting forth the broad and long tongue mark that we explained earlier. Also, regarding the 6 kinds of quaking we just discussed, different sutras and treatises have different explanations. Here, the 6 kinds of quaking actually cannot be perceived by ordinary sentient beings. Otherwise, if our entire world were like this, it would be like a great earthquake occurring. We would all be very afraid. Many people would feel very afraid when there's hail and thunder at night. So if the Buddha displayed such miraculous changes, that would be very frightening. However, generally we ordinary people don't know that when a baby is rocked in a cradle, the baby doesn't feel it was rocking, it's very comfortable. Moreover, these manifestations actually mainly allow bodhisattvas with divine vision to perceive them, causing celestial māras and non-Buddhists to experience fear, making all beings in the entire world becoming suitable vessels for the Dharma and so forth. There are many purposes. Also in other sutras like the Avatamsaka Sutra, it say that ordinary beings are unaware and unknowing these 6 kinds of quaking. They simply don't know. So these so-called 6 kinds of quaking are appearances within the realm of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Actually, we ordinary sentient beings don't need to be afraid. Otherwise, you see that the east rises, the west sinks. Wow, everyone would be very frightened. And then again, the west rises and the east sinks. Then the whole world would have very terrifying phenomena. Actually, none of this exists. This was also explained before. At that time, the Buddha had said definitive and profound Dharma for taming beings. At this time, such scenes appeared. Again from the root of the tongue. Here add, again from. Great light was sent forth from his tongue, and it greatly illuminated the 10 directions. We just mentioned the 6 kinds of quaking appeared, and that great illumination sent forth from the root of the tongue. What effect did this have? Our entire Saha world made everything impermanent, permanent, because Pure Lands is not like our world where people sometimes feel happy, sometimes feel suffering, sometimes joyful, sometimes unhappy, or today the weather is good, tomorrow the weather is bad. It's not like this. Everything is like the land of ultimate bliss. All these worlds are permanently present. Impurity transforms into purity. Suffering transforms into bliss. Ignorance transforms into clear awareness. We beings of ignorance and afflictions all become beings with wisdom. So this is the most definitive permanence, bliss, self, and purity, as taught in the Uttara Tantra. At that time when the Buddha turned the great Dharma wheel, the entire world became permanence, bliss, self, and purity. At this time, where did the Buddha's light illuminate? Mountains, forests, lands, rivers, seas, also the Iron Ring Mountains, all hells high and low, all extremely level and pure. When Buddhas and Bodhisattvas display miraculous transformations, the entire world will become such pure. It's like in the Vimalakarti Sutra, the debate between Brahmashikin and Shariputra, it was the same at that time. The entire world became thus pure without defilement. Here is it A or Wu. It should be A. Wu may mainly refer to the mental aspect. They were excellently ornamented like the world in the eastern direction, completely pure full moon. Regarding the full moon world, the Nirvana Sutra also mentions it. When teaching about the land of unexcelled, the Nirvana Sutra describes it as extremely magnificent and equal, like the western land of ultimate bliss, like the eastern full moon world. The Nirvana Sutra also taught this. Also in the Sutra of Buddha names, homage to the sorrowless Buddha of the full moon world. In that prayer, homage to the sorrowless Buddha of the full moon world, the Buddha without sorrow. It seems some eminent masters in the Han region said the full moon world is the eastern lapis lazuli world. There's also this explanation. Specifically, what basis is there for this? It's not particularly clear. In any case, our entire Saha world at that time is equivalent to what everyone could see together, what everyone could experience together. It became like the eastern full moon world. Actually, I'm thinking if in ancient times when there was no internet, no transmission of information, if one taught such very abstract and profound principles, everyone might be half believing, half doubting. Now, not to mention the Buddha's spiritual power through the power of the internet, the existent becomes non-existent, the non-existent becomes existent. Scenes that transcend many worlds can all be seen and heard. So I think in this information age, on one hand, this inconceivable power is very good, including many young people. What do they live in every day? A rather ethereal and illusory world. They can also create many new worlds and new beings. Then on the internet, whether they go to war or make friends, all sorts of things that they can see, they can hear, and in imagination it's also possible. Also our novels and films, especially many animated films, can create many inconceivable scenes. We can see them, we can hear them, including communication between Eastern and Western worlds and so forth. Some of it we can do. Some countries' defense ministers have said that in the future, between world and world, various inconceivable scenes can only be understood from religious texts. Actually, we can indeed say now that in our Buddhism, so many years ago, we already taught about inconceivable worlds, all kinds of inconceivable, miraculous transformations and phenomena. Perhaps before we had these devices, before we had these platforms, ancient people were confined to a particularly narrow world. At that time, when you explained it, it was very hard to believe. I think modern people compared to ancient people should be more open-minded in certain aspects. Moreover, in their thinking, they also have capacity to accept it. The Buddha's inconceivable states, sometimes we see in different films, different television shows, they also depict many inconceivable worlds, inconceivable lands, inconceivable beings, karma, and so forth. So at that time, indeed, through the Buddha turning the great Dharma wheel, this power and auspicious connection, for this reason the entire world became like the Eastern pure and adorned full moon world. This was witnessed by all. When we taught the Vimalakarti Sutra and Lotus Sutra, sometimes through the Buddha's blessing power, surrounding people can see the true nature of the world, and worlds countless tens of thousands away. Buddha lands, including scenes of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, these could all be seen. The Buddha's power is inconceivable. At this time, there were also many phenomena. Shakyamuni Buddha began to manifest emanation bodies, manifesting especially many emanations. Buddha's emanations descended from space like falling flower rain. Above, exactly like Shakyamuni Buddha, various emanations began to appear. Some emerged from under the ground. It was like clouds and mist rising. We all know mist and clouds emerge from the earth. Some descended like rain. Some appeared from below like mist. They completely filling the sky so that the sky wasn't even the slightest bit empty. All was filled with Buddha's emanations. No space in between. No empty space. All densely packed like opening a sesame pod. It teaches this in some generation stage practices. Like when it snows heavily, the entire space is filled with drifting snowflakes. Continuously with no other space. All was filled with Buddha's emanation. Every one of the emanations, speaking the same words, said, at that time, all of the Buddha's many emanations all spoke with one voice. What did they say? The Tathagata will nurture and remain because he does not pass beyond sorrow. All sentient beings have the intrinsic nature of a Buddha. Some versions write, possess Buddha nature, also saying. Old versions say, teaching all dharmas, all return to emptiness. Here we'll change a few characters. That is to say, just now, all proclaiming the Tathagata's constant nature is without cessation, teaching that all beings possess Buddha nature, teaching all dharmas, all return to emptiness. The causes and results of all those paths of action, they are subsumed into a single vehicle. Looking here, I see approximately 1, 2, 3, 4 questions. These 4 questions are the most important in the Sutra of Great Liberation. This should be the most profound part. Everyone should remember this. Sometimes when we study a sutra or treatise, if we don't realize the central thought, when others ask what the Sutra of Great Liberation teaches, it seems to have names of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, seems to have Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya. If you can't remember anything besides this, I think it's very regrettable. At that time, the Buddha's many emanations filled the sky, then all speaking with one voice, saying what? The first question, this was also mentioned earlier. All Tathagatas' constant nature is without cessation, constantly abiding without cessation. This is the first principle. As I just said, in our world, any speaker may not be able to say this. We can also see in so many books, the Tathagata constantly abides without cessation. Who dares to say this? Who would say this? Who knows this principle? This should be very clear. This is the first question. Then the second question, teaching that all beings possess a Buddha nature. We also explained earlier that all these beings, even ants and mole crickets and above, all beings, great and small, have the seed of Buddhahood, all have Tathagata Garbha, and all have Buddha nature. This is the second question. The third question is that teaching all dharmas, all return to emptiness, including Tathagata Garbha, including Buddha nature. All dharmas, ultimately their nature returns to emptiness. There is no permanently unchanging dharma. Even Tathagata Garbha, its nature is also emptiness. This is the third important one. The fourth question is that myriad practices of cause and effect all return to the one vehicle, whether the 6 paramitas and myriad practices, all causal dharmas and fruition dharmas, all of these ultimately return to the ultimate one vehicle. There are no 3 vehicles, no 9 vehicles. Ultimately, the most definitive, the one vehicle. This is the fourth. So regarding this, I think today everyone should remember it. Just like sometimes in the past when we taught the most important dharma in a sutra, the essential thought, everyone must remember it. Why does the Sutra of Great Liberation have such great merit? Actually, here it mainly teaches, we could say this, the ultimate thought of the third and second turnings of the Dharma wheel. You see, the Tathagata constantly abides without cessation. All beings possess Buddha nature, the most ultimate meaning of the third turning of the Dharma wheel. Teaching all dharmas return to emptiness is the ultimate of the second turning of the Dharma wheel. Myriad practices of cause and effect return turn to one vehicle. We could also say this is the third turning or the second turning. We can say either. So regarding this teaching, everyone should remember it, because the Buddha manifested so many Buddhas and they appeared to turn the Dharma wheel. Actually, if all of you present truly understand the meaning of these few sentences, I think this person's view should be quite excellent, including their practice when they truly understand this way. Of course, to understand these principles, I think the most important thing is to study the Uttara Tantra well. You see, the Buddha's eternal nature without cessation, the Uttara Tantra also teaches this very well. All beings possess Buddha nature. Likewise, all dharmas are empty. Perhaps Madhyamaka teaches it well. The ultimate one vehicle, the Uttara Tantra, teaches it very well. So the Uttara Tantra is indeed very important. When I taught the Uttara Tantra, I also told everyone that in the future, I hope when our Dharma friends have the opportunity, you should teach it to everyone. Now, many beings are truly very pitiable. They don't even understand the principle that they possess Buddha nature. Good has good retribution, evil has evil retribution. They don't understand these conventional truths. All dharmas are empty in ultimate meaning. They don't understand the principle of the ultimate one vehicle either. Every day they just live for fame. For the eight worldly dharmas continuously living this way. Living is also very exhausting. In one lifetime they do numerous things, but in the end they also gain nothing. Many beings are truly very pitiable. So after we study these teachings, at least our mind stream should undergo some transformation. Otherwise, I think we have no purpose. Every day just muddling through in confusion. You can continue this way, but actually the meaning isn't very great. Each person's time for study is limited. During the process of study, if you study deeply, solidly, and you have particularly strong feelings, share these feelings with beings, this can have an effect. If when you study you haven't tasted and felt it, you're just sitting among the ranks of Dharma listeners. When class is over, you happily go back. When class begins, you tearfully arrive. While listening to class, you carelessly sit there. Actually, an hour or so quickly passes and there's not much meaning. But if you have a particularly precious mind, even just one class, oh, I feel this is extremely rare. If you truly remember with a mind of rarity, then in the future, whether benefiting beings or practicing yourself, it will have meaning. I think these teachings, if no one explains them, you can just read through them without much thought. But if you contemplate carefully, indeed this is the most important part in this sutra, as soon as they had said this, after the Buddha finished saying these words, they all disappeared. Just now, weren't there especially many Buddhas coming from above and below? After turning this Dharma wheel, they suddenly disappeared, manifesting miraculous changes. Indeed, this is very meaningful. The Bhagavan quickly appeared seated on a cushion. At that time, the entire assembly saw the Buddha's emanations. All saw the emanation Buddhas. Everyone who saw these all knew this was Shakyamuni Buddha's power. Shakyamuni Buddha was like a compassionate father, manifesting such miraculous and powerful transformations. Because of the Buddha's manifestation, sometimes beings through the Buddha's power, turning the Dharma wheel, you see in these verses earlier, so many beings already attained liberation. Actually, the words through which they attained liberation are just these few sentences. Already, some attained arhatship, some attained the acceptance of non-arising, some attained other, once returner, non-returner, stream enterer fruits. Yet we not only haven't attained any fruit, we don't even have much feeling. Sometimes we beings are still very pitiable. At that time, perhaps what the Buddha said carried a blessing power. But these words perhaps have nothing, neither added nor subtracted. Besides this, at that time there was nothing special. If we had been present, perhaps we too would have attained the acceptance of non-arising and more. At this time, among all those present, 40 Ganges sands of bodhisattvas attained the acceptance of non-arising. 80,000 Shravakas attained the Mahayana mind generation, Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi mind. 10,000 fully ordained monks attained the Arhat path. 18,000 fully ordained nuns attained the Anagamin path, meaning non-returner. Then 400 million male householders attained Sakadagamin fruit. Sakadagamin fruit is once returner. Then 1 billion female householders attained Srotapana fruit. It seems regarding women, there were more women, but what they attained was comparatively lower. You see, 10,000 bhiksus, they all attained arhatship. 18,000 bhiksunis attained non-returner. Upasakas also. 400 million upasakas attained once returner. Upasikas also 1 billion. In the past, perhaps there were comparatively more women, fewer men. I don't know the reason. Innumerable devas and humans attain the pure Dharma I, also themselves attaining knowledge of past lives, knowing their own past lives, knowing conditioned dharmas as impermanent. At that time, because they attained the pure Dharma I, they understood all conditioned dharmas as impermanent. I think many of us here, in the process of study and contemplation, should have what Mipham Rinpoche in his debate treatise with Lama Ngakpa taught on the causal ground, including while on the path of learning, comparatively similar certainties. For example, those innumerable devas attained the pure Dharma I. Their impermanence view should have been very strong then. When we practice now, we also need to have a view of impermanence. Personally, I feel my view of impermanence is adequate. Yet observing our Khenpos and Khenmos, many people in their ordinary speech and conversation still seem somewhat deficient in this impermanence view. Because people with a view of impermanence, when casually chatting or discussing anything, naturally manifest impermanence awareness constantly, yet many here perhaps still need to cultivate impermanence. As various preliminary practice teachings explain, if one truly develops a particularly strong view of impermanence, thoughts toward worldly dharmas will become fewer and fewer, while transcendent practice will become more and more diligent. This is very important. Sometimes I think my view of impermanence should be adequate, but this illness, I don't know if many people have contracted it. In any case, ordinarily, everyone grasps as if things were very permanent. Actually, our human life is truly very impermanent. When it's said to be gone, it's gone. Before that, if we don't practice well, indeed this impermanence, whether spring, summer, autumn, winter, or all things, also with our relatives and friends, feelings between people, including our buildings, this year we think this is the most solid, the best quality, but next year various impermanences also appear. So I think, of course, higher levels of impermanence as taught here, knowledge of past lives, impermanence. But generally speaking, when we practice, we should all examine ourselves. If in your mind stream you have a very good view of impermanence, then perhaps in terms of practice, you should make progress. If you don't have any view of impermanence at all, perhaps many worldly dharmas become quite serious. We should also reflect this aspect. At this time, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Simhagosa didn't the Buddha just teach the Dharma wheel of the lion's roar. He was probably touched by it. His name is the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Simhagosa. So in the middle volume, when the Buddha just spoke of the lion's roar, I am lion's roar, he came forward. The Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Simhagosa rose from his seat, draped his upper robe. The character Li was added later. Without Li is also fine. He draped his upper robe over one shoulder and prostrated, touching his head to the Bhagavan's feet, and spoke to the Buddha. If it is as the Bhagavan taught earlier, hearing the Buddha's name can eliminate negativity. Hearing the Dharma's name can eliminate negativity. Hearing the Sangha's name can eliminate negativity. Then I ask, perhaps here a question mark would be better. If these Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, three jewels, can each eliminate negativity, is it through the Buddha's power that negativity is eliminated, or the Dharma's power that eliminates negativity, or is it the Sangha's power that eliminates negativity? If it's the Buddha's power, if we say it's through the Buddha's power that negativity is eliminated, then we only need to make requests to the Buddha, not needing Dharma and Sangha. If we say it's through the Dharma's power that negativity is eliminated, if it's the Dharma's power, we should seek the Dharma. We only need to seek the Dharma, not needing Buddha and Sangha. If we say it's through the Sangha's power that negativity is eliminated, if it's the Sangha's power, we should seek the Sangha, then we only need to seek the Sangha. Why need to seek the three? His question here is also quite pointed. What you said above is that the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, three jewels we spoke of earlier, can eliminate negativity accumulated since beginningless time. In that case, is it the Buddha who eliminates negativity, the Dharma who eliminates negativity, or the Sangha who eliminates negativity? If it's one of them, we only need to seek that one. Why do we need to seek the three jewels? As stated above, there is only one vehicle. If there is only one vehicle, then beings also see three vehicles. The Buddha also taught three vehicles. Then what about beings? Why not teach or not see? If you say there is the ultimate one vehicle, why do beings see three vehicles? Why does the Buddha teach three vehicles? If the Buddha teaches three vehicles, even more so for beings, they can also practice according to what the Buddha taught. This is his question. At this time, the Buddha told the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Simagosa, excellent, excellent, son of the lineage, it is also especially excellent that you have asked about the meaning. This question is very good. In some sutras we've mentioned before, in Tibetan it's also like this. You asked extremely well, you asked very well. He said, for the sake of the benefit and happiness of sentient beings, listen well. I will now explain to you in detail. The Buddha began to prepare to proclaim. Actually, according to the Mahaprajnaparamita Shastra, the Buddha's answers have several different types. The first is called definite answer. When there's definite meaning, this is called definite answer. The second is differentiated meaning answer. The Buddha thinks which are meaningful, which are beneficial to beings, then he differentiates and answers them. Here is differentiated explanation. So when it's beneficial, he makes explanation in different ways. Also, there's counter-questioning answer. When others ask, the Buddha uses a counter-question. What do you think? Just like nowadays, some celebrities, some politicians and scholars, when asked, it's inconvenient for them to answer directly. So when asked, what do you think? What would you say? Guess. This is called counter-questioning answer. Sometimes he doesn't dare to answer, or sometimes it's inconvenient to answer. This is also a method. When we debate, it's also like this. Counter-question him with a question. Also, finally, there's setting aside answer. Ji means to put aside, temporarily setting aside without answering, like the 14 unanswerable questions. Even if you answer him, there's no meaning for beings, so setting aside answer. Generally, the Buddha won't answer in such situations, so here the Buddha differentiates and answers them. When differentiating and answering, what does he say? Not solely the Buddha's power, just now relying on the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, three jewels, to eliminate negativity. It's not solely the Buddha's power that eliminates negativity, nor solely the Dharma's power that eliminates negativity, nor solely the Sangha's power that eliminates negativity. Then what eliminates negativity? All our collective powers. That is to say, relying on the power of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, three jewels collectively concentrated together, can eliminate negativity. It's a Dharma of conditions. Because within Buddha there is Dharma, within Dharma there is Sangha. The Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha three jewels are without separation or union. Therefore, it's not the Dharma power without Buddha that eliminates negativity, or the Buddha power without Dharma that eliminates negativity. Perhaps these are all not realistic. Therefore, it's said through the power of the collection of all. Why say this? The Buddha is the parent who is the protector and refuge of sentient beings, and that bodhisattvas are virtuous friends. Certifying knowledge means spiritual friend, guides leading beings. Such bewildered beings, if they have awakening and become weary of samsara, relying on strong power of this thought, they can transcend the great ocean of samsara's afflictions. To achieve this goal, one should have great extensive sutras as the great ship. So this is the Dharma. Just now, within Buddha there is Dharma. Within Dharma there is Sangha, these three. Because Buddha is the refuge for beings, without Sangha there is no guide. Without Dharma, it's like crossing the great ocean without a ship. These three are indispensable. So these three jewels are all needed when eliminating negativity. Then here it says, what are Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha actually? Buddha is precisely Dharma. Dharma is precisely Sangha. The Sangha is that which is uncompounded. That which is uncompounded is emptiness. Below, the most definitive Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha three jewels are already taught. Actually, Buddha is Dharma. The nature of Dharma is the realm of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. The nature of Sangha is unconditioned Dharmas. Unconditioned Dharmas are emptiness. Emptiness has these aspects: uncompounded emptiness, compounded emptiness, internal emptiness, external emptiness, great emptiness, and also small emptiness are all similar as emptiness, and there is nothing other than those. So here The essence of the three jewels is also emptiness. This is also very important. Any of our Dharma teachings, the most ultimate meaning finally returns to emptiness. Just as taught in the Entering the Middle Way. Thus, having extensively taught the 16 emptinesses, again briefly explaining them as 4 is also permitted in Mahayana, first teaching the 16 emptinesses, then summarizing them as 4 emptinesses: existent emptiness, non-existent emptiness, self-nature emptiness, and other nature emptiness. He finally proclaims the 4 emptinesses. In the outline there is, in the verses I'm not sure. According to the Prajaparamita's perspective, it teaches 20 kinds of emptiness. Actually, whether conditioned Dharma emptiness, existent Dharma emptiness, or unconditioned Dharma emptiness, these are all one meaning. So ultimately the essence of the three jewels returns to emptiness. This is very important. Finally, we still need to understand the principle of emptiness, the ultimate meaning of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha three jewels, whether the 16 emptinesses, the 20 emptinesses, or the 4 emptinesses. Regarding emptiness, there's no difference. Of course, this emptiness is not, as we've explained before, merely a bare emptiness. It's not like this. The Buddha said, son of the lineage, the question that you asked, should seek one, why need to seek 3? This principle is like this, how to answer. For example, take a single person that is afraid by the void of space. Wherever they go, although they crouch and hide, they are never separate from space, not separate from empty space. This is an analogy. Some people fear emptiness, fear some principles. They try to avoid it, to evade it. There's no way. A person who fears empty space goes everywhere to hide. The places where they hide all have empty space. There's no place. Similarly, son of the lineage, everything that the Tathagatas of the 10 directions have explained and that I have explained does not go beyond the causes and conditions for all virtues, the 3 jewels and the triple yet also solitary vehicle. Here it says, the Buddha says, whether what I teach or what Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions teach, in any case, whether myriad wholesome conditions, all 3 jewels and 3 vehicles, all don't surpass one, all are none other than one vehicle, ultimate emptiness. As we explained before, this middle section is not in Tibetan, it should be in Chinese version, for the good of beginning, middle, and end, for all beings, differentiating and teaching 3, therefore called one characteristic 3 jewels. Of course, explaining the literal meaning, whether the 3 jewels or 3 vehicles, all have beginning, middle, and end goodness. Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, 3 jewels, beginning, middle, and end goodness. We can say this. The 3 vehicles also have beginning, middle, and end goodness. So these differentiating and teaching as 3 for all beings, therefore called one characteristic, 3 jewels, ultimate one vehicle. But temporarily speaking, as taught in the Uttara Tantra, there are temporary 3 jewels and ultimate 3 jewels. The Lankavatara Sutra also teaches that the Dharma taught by the Buddha, one is called verbal teaching Dharma, which mainly teaches some expedient dharmas. Also there's one called as it is Dharma, which actually is true nature Dharma, definitive Dharma. It says there are 2 kinds. I teach 2 kinds of Dharma, verbal teaching and as it is. Verbal teaching guides ordinary beings. The real is for practitioners. Just now it says the Dharma taught by the Buddha has 2 kinds. One is verbal teaching Dharma, one is as it is Dharma. The former verbal teaching Dharma actually is mainly proclaimed for ordinary sentient beings. The latter, as it is Dharma, is mainly for practitioners. Practitioners here probably refers to noble ones. Teaching them true nature and profound principles of practice, they can accept it. This middle section mentioned above is not in Tibetan. I didn't have time to look at the Dunhuang version. The Dunhuang version should probably have it, because the Tibetan and the version we currently use basically don't have great discrepancies on the lower volume. In individual places where we've added, we've already changed it. So beginning, middle, and end goodness is also taught as 3 kinds for beings. Therefore it can be called one characteristic 3 jewels, like when we teach the ultimate, there's only taking refuge in the Buddha jewel. Temporarily there are 3 jewels. Perhaps this meaning. At this time, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva Simhagosa said, excellent, excellent. Bodhisattvas sometimes also say to the Tathagata, excellent, excellent. Generally speaking, the Tathagata says to Bodhisattvas, excellent, excellent. But today, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva Simhagosa is rather arrogant. He says to the Tathagata, excellent, Excellent. As was taught by the Arya beings, I've known your teachings long ago. I asked my previous request about the meaning for the sake of sentient beings. I was knowingly asking for the benefit of beings. He's still quite good, so we'll teach to hear today.
Bandırıngırı badma asıdırdı Bandırıngırı badma asıdı Bandırıngırı badma asıdırdı